when she needs a fresh diaper and doesn't want to cooperate in getting a fresh diaper, and I get frustrated rather than understanding that she's a 2-year-old and like she's just not going to cooperate all the time. And I get mad at myself for not handling that situation exactly how I think it should be handled 100% of the time. And my therapist the other day was saying, what a beautiful thing. You get to teach your daughter it's okay to be wrong sometimes. And I was like, wow, man, that is a different way to look at that situation.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Yo, and welcome to another episode of Rise, Recover, Live, the podcast. I am your host, Bryce III.
And I am also your host, Liz McKean. And we're so pumped to introduce you to our guest today. But first, how's your energy, Bryce?
Oh, whoa. Before we even introduce the guest, we're asking Bryce how his energy is. Wow, actually, Bryce's energy is resilient. It is a bit energetic and feeling like I can not only do hard stuff, but that like I'm specifically qualified to continue to show up with a beginner's mind. And I think that's very important, which I've learned because there's been a lot of stuff in life recently where it's like, oh, I live in a world where like this thing has happened now. And I come from like not being able to live that life where it's like a thing. I would be stuck on it for like months. Like, I can't believe that this thing happened or this person said this thing or that this thing happened. And it's like, now it's like, oh, like that's the nature of life, continuously changing, developing, evolving, and unfolding. And so I feel like a student of life. And that is your very long answer to how's my energy. How's your energy, Liz?
Good answer. My energy is great, actually. I was on a meeting before this conversation and actually said, like, I need to see if there's, a caffeinated, beverage in this room that I can find before we go on, because I was feeling a little just tired. And then as soon as I saw both of your faces and we started kind of just having our pre-show chit chat, it was like natural caffeination. So thanks for the boost, both of you.
Yeah, once I knew who today's guest was, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a piece of cake. And also this will be a great conversation to have in public, because I know we've had multiple conversations in private that have enriched my life and have aided in my understanding. So Liz, won't you introduce our guest today?
I would love to. I feel like it's the buildup is like really fun. We should do this more often. So our guest today is Stephen Michael. And Stephen is someone who is part of the Phoenix staff community, but quickly becoming, just one of my very favorites. Somebody that you just can't help but enjoy having a conversation with. He's working on the ops team at the Phoenix, but also has a really cool story. And every time we have a conversation, I can see medals hanging in the background. So I'm excited to hear about some of those activities. So welcome, Stephen, to the podcast. We're so happy that you are here. And how are you today?
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Bryce. It's good to be here. I'm a little anxious, feeling a little nervous. Like it's like a weird, strangely intimidating place to be. I'm a regular listener to the podcast. It feels weird being in this physical space and virtual space with you all being like, oh, this is going to get recorded and put out somewhere. And that gives me a little bit of anxiety.
Well, just to let you know, that's probably a good thing, because you're in great company. I can't tell you one person who came on this podcast and was like, I feel perfect and like I don't feel anxious at all. And you being an avid listener to the podcast, like you know the conversations that are bred out of that energy. And so we're super excited to have you. And I think it's your turn to ask the question, how's your energy?
I I'm feeling a little anxious.
Tell us you're anxious twice, Stephen.
I'm feeling pretty good though today. Like positive energy, which for me kind of comes in waves. But right now, feeling pretty good and excited to have this conversation. Bryce, like you said, we've had a bunch of really cool conversations, and Liz and we've had a bunch of cool conversations, and this is just it seems like a great opportunity to have a slightly more public version of some of those conversations, which is pretty rad.
To kind of delve in and learn a little bit more about you, do you identify as a person in recovery?
Yeah, I'm sober. I got sober in April of 2016. I guess I also identify as a person in recovery. I work 12-step program. That's a huge part of my recovery still. One of the cool things for me about being at the Phoenix is like meeting a whole bunch of other people who are also in recovery, but didn't come through 12-step programs, because my whole kind of recovery community pre-Phoenix was all 12-step based. And so it's been a really cool learning experience to understand different pathways and appreciate different pathways. That's a long answer of yes.
No, that's a beautiful answer. And I think me and Liz have had some conversation behind the scenes that are in alignment with that understanding that inherently happens when you put people from different walks of life in the same room, because Liz's pathway to recovery and my pathway to recovery are different. And so I think being exposed to these communities allow for us to continuously have a higher understanding. And I think that's a beautiful contribution of like that exposure. Wouldn't you agree, Liz?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. And I think we talk about breaking down stigma as a goal of this podcast. And, that is pretty typically talking about like the stigma of addiction and recovery, like out into the world, like how the world sees, and even how we see ourselves, like as people who have had that experience and people who are, in it and maybe haven't maybe aren't even seeking recovery or have not gotten there yet. And just like what that looks like in the world. But I think also there's a stigma that is within the recovery community, because inherently we all feel like our way is something we hold so dear because it saved us, and it's like, I did this thing that saved my life. So like, we just wanted to give it to more people and to allow space for people to have their own experience, and sometimes starts and stops within that, I think is something that this podcast is hopefully going to be able to do too. So I'm excited. And Stephen, you're somebody that I've noticed that, in that kind of conversation and beyond, you're just open, like, you're somebody who's really interested in learning about other people and other viewpoints. And is that something that is that part of you that came through recovery in 12 steps, or is that just a person you've been forever and ever? Amen.
I mean, I think it's a really good question. I feel like I don't even really remember the person that I was before. My life and my experience of life is so dramatically different today than it was when I was, still drinking and using. I think it's hard to even relate sometimes to that person. But I've always been curious about, different perspectives of things. I've shared this a lot kind of in the rooms. I used to think of myself as like very open-minded. And then I got into the rooms, the 12-step rooms, and realized I'm very open-minded if you agree with me. And so I think that definitely has come, like that awareness of being closed-minded, and that awareness of being able to recognize some of that stuff come up has been something that definitely has grown as a part of my recovery and continues to grow. And I have opportunities every day to kind of check my assumptions and check my expectations. And like we were talking before too, just kind of like check the thoughts that are going on in my head against reality. And oftentimes they don't match.
Yeah, I think that is inherent in active recovery. And what I mean by active, I mean like when a person is like really working to be a student of life, to be a student of recovery, intentionality. Like you can see like, oh, because I know we all had that experience of coming across something or hearing somebody share something, and then that, that inclination to like, yo, no, you're wrong. Or for me, the way I describe it is like this grating upon the walls of like my existence. Like, no, but what I've learned is like that grating sands down those walls and unboxes me if I allow for it. If I don't push back against it, if I don't resist it, and if I allow for that grading, like it gives me a larger understanding, which in turn expands the way that I'm able to show up for people, for myself, and for all of the spaces that I'm able to contribute in. And I think I didn't have any of that pre conversation of recovery, So that's I think that's the mark of like and I don't want to say like good recovery, because like who has a monopoly on what's right, but I know
Stephen
for me
does. We've decided.
I know for me that's an important trait of recovery in action.
Yeah. I agree. I'm wondering, Stephen, before we hopped on, actually, Bryce, I think it might even been before you hopped on, we were talking about that voice in our heads that is just saying that everybody hates me. Like everybody's looking at me right now and everybody's mad at me and hates me and thinks I'm stupid and all those things. I might be projecting a little bit of my own voices in my head as I'm describing it, but a version of that you said is the case for you. So I think, I feel like this is something that I hear from a lot of people who have had an experience with substance use disorder, and like having that feeling of everyone hates me and I'm just the worst and everyone's, judging me. But then also I'm right and everybody else is wrong. And like, that's like a super conflicting kind of, those are like two different egos almost like bumping up against each other. So I'm wondering if that plays a part in your story, maybe pre-recovery, if like that was a battle that you were trying to silence, or if not at all. And either way, I'd like to hear about pre-recovery for you.
Probably. I mean, it's something I struggle with still now. And I didn't really even realize that I was struggling with it until like 2 weeks ago. And it's just really interesting. Like these, I had a recent experience where it was brought to my attention that perhaps my thoughts are not accurate. I have this narrative, and this gets to this is maybe a long answer to your question.
You're here to talk. Please do a long response.
This gets to that. I think what I've realized is that I was drinking and using because I like the effects produced by drugs and alcohol. That in itself could be enough for me. I liked to increase the feelings of like joy and ecstasy that I had, and like I could do that with drugs and alcohol. And I like to numb the negative feelings, and I could do that with drugs and alcohol. It worked really, really well for a really long time. And I'm realizing that kind of the longer that I've been in active recovery, that I still have this narrative in my head that tells me I'm not enough. And there's a lot of blanks that go before that. I'm not good enough. I'm not fit enough. I'm not, a good enough father. I'm not a good enough partner. I'm not like, but the constant thread really in my existence is I'm just not enough. I just live with that. It's like it's just the air that I breathe. And have just kind of come to terms with the fact that my brain is just wired that way. And I think the scary thing is, I needed outside, like an outside influence to help me recognize that perhaps that's not true. And it was actually my partner a couple weeks ago had said, "Hey, are you suffering?" And I said, well, yeah, like this is miserable to live like this. It's miserable to constantly think that I'm not enough and I'm never going to be enough, no matter what I do is never going to be enough. And she said, well, that thought sounds like it's thriving. And so if you're suffering, you can't be your thoughts. There must be a separation between there, because you're suffering, your thoughts are thriving. If you were your thoughts, if that were true, you'd also be thriving. And that was like, early on, I remember in my early recovery, my first sponsor said, you don't have to believe your own thoughts. And like, that was like a novel idea. I thought it just applied to the fact that my brain was constantly telling me to drink and use. But it turns out it's like everything. And I don't have to believe my own thoughts, which is also terrifying because I've been living my whole life like this in this reality and realizing, like I said, literally like 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, realizing that perhaps my thoughts are not accurate. And if that's the case, I sometimes don't know what's real. And it's like a really weird experience to be kind of trying to come to terms with. It just it's a strange place to be in my recovery right now in this journey. But I've also heard so many stories of people that are like, oh yeah. And then I was like X number of years into recovery and like hit this like new weird bottom or like had this like opportunity for growth. And, it just feels like that's where I'm at, which is interesting.
And that I think that speaks to the non-linear nature of this experience. Oftentimes, especially like in 12-step, we can look at the years or the chips as like accomplishments. Like, I share that I've been in recovery for 9 years. Like people are like, oh, okay, all right, you doing something. And it's like, yeah, but the most important day in those years is today. And really and truly, like for my own good, like a lot of times I got to throw the numbers out. The only reason I'll share that number is because of like, I know the effect that it may have on somebody who is new. And when they're looking for somebody to help them or work with. But other than that, like it's not, I won't say that the years don't mean anything to me, but which they do. And I'm grateful for, this length of time, but it's the quality of that time. And right now is the only time that I'm actually active in, like in this very moment. So it's not 9 years today, it's just right now.
Yeah.
Right. So, and right now there may be things that I need to learn about my personal finances. There might be things I need to learn about business because there's these desires that I've learned to cultivate due to like not being at a baseline, like just trying to survive because, of these other things that I was doing when I was like drinking and using. I was in survival mode, so I didn't have the mental or spiritual capacity to like even want for anything, so the longer I have the experience of having desires, in the space to be able to manifest those desires, the more I come across maybe, and I'm carefully using the word deficiency, but maybe seeing what is deficient that I can contribute to now that can get me to where it is that I desire to go. Because I have a place to lay my head. I'm not worried about if the DTE bill gonna get shut off. I'm not worried about if we gonna eat, I'm not worried about like, am I gonna be okay to show up to this thing? Can I trust myself? Can I rely on myself? And in that, it comes other things that it's like, okay, well, I'm not fulfilled in this area and now I can do something about it. And there's still that experience of like, I don't necessarily feel good. Because if I felt great about it, like, I'd be satisfied. But there's this, I don't feel good about this thing. But the beauty of recovery is like, I've been put in the driver's seat and now I can do something about it. Even if that's just changing my mindset or the way that I look at something or the way that I identify as a human being in this world, like I identify as like everything that I think is who I am. And it's like, well, how has that been working for me? And it's like, it actually hasn't because, I think 1 million thoughts a day and some of them are self-depreciating. Yeah. Or it's like, how can I build a better relationship in relation to my thoughts? And then, that may send you off and run into a mindfulness practice. That may send you off and run into a new relationship with journaling, but that's the deepening of the conversation that comes with showing up over and over again for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't wait for this. I think one of the biggest seeds that were planted in my life that were kind of like the catalyst for a lot of these conversations was having other little humans depend on me in the process and ask me questions, whether it be with their mouths or their actions, that is like, yo, do you have the answers to these? And then when I looked and was like, no, I don't. Like it sent me upon my journey of like figuring it out so I can, continually be a reference point for these human beings. So let's talk fatherhood. So you are a father.
I'm a father. Yeah, that's like, I mean, these days, that's my primary identity. And it's just such an amazing thing. I got a 2-year-old, Harper. She is so rad. I'm very biased, but I think she's so rad. And it's just like all I want to do is just like spend time with her and see her explore the world and do all this kind of stuff. And it just is amazing to be able to do that sober. And hopefully she'll never have to see me drink or use. I don't know what the future holds, but hopefully that'll be the case, and I can continue to be a present father for her, and a present partner for my partner and all of that. But I try not to like go down the negative, kind of rabbit hole. But I hear a lot of stories of people that don't have relationships with their kids, that their kids, like growing up, only saw them like completely destroy their lives and their families and like all of that stuff. And they've lost so much. And I just feel I live in so much gratitude every day that despite my wants and desires of like having a family more than 2 years ago, more than 6 years ago, the universe didn't see it fitting for me to be a father until I was sober. And I'm grateful for that every day, man, because like I don't think I would be parenthood requires a lot of patience. And I don't think I would have the level of patience that I have today if it weren't for physical and emotional sobriety.
Patience for others, right? Because you got these little humans, but I think even more so patience for ourselves. Like, and then how you share like that constant, the perpetual conversation. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Like, I think the amount of compassion that I've had to have for myself in the midst of showing, these humans that I aided in bringing into the world, like how to navigate, as I continue to learn to navigate, has been overwhelming, and the biggest tool that I've learned in the midst of all of that is compassion for self, is patience with self, is creating a space where it's like, look, I cannot know. And even more so building that into parenthood, where it's like, not only do I not know, but we're going to have family discussions about how I don't know, so that that I don't know, and so that we can all figure it out together, and so you don't have these unrealistic expectations of me.
Yeah, man. I mean,
I think one of the biggest things... No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. One of the biggest things what?
I was just going to say, just to add, like, I think one of the biggest things, and I love my mom to death, and she listens to a lot of the stuff I do, so she listens to this. She knows what this is. But, like, one thing she used to say all the time is, like, I know everything. And so when I would question her about things, and she was like, because I know everything. And so, like, once I got a little older and I started realizing, like, oh, you don't know nothing. like you don't know none of this stuff that I want to know. Like, you said you knew everything. I felt like I was tricked, like you lied to me. And, for a little period of my life, especially like early teens, like when I was really wild and like that, I would use that as fuel to like rebel, So it's like baking my success into my process. Is like the same with parenthood. Like, I'm gonna bake the opportunity for you all to understand into our relationship and let you know very early on, I don't know what I'm doing, and we're gonna figure this out together.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing, man. I think it's reminiscent of conversations I've been having with my therapist recently about making mistakes. And I beat myself up all the time when I make a mistake. I tell myself they're avoidable mistakes. It's like simple things like getting frustrated with my kid when she needs a fresh diaper and doesn't want to cooperate in getting a fresh diaper, and I get frustrated rather than understanding that she's a 2-year-old and like she's just not going to cooperate all the time. And I get mad at myself for not handling that situation exactly how I think it should be handled 100% of the time. And my therapist the other day was saying, what a beautiful thing. You get to teach your daughter it's okay to be wrong sometimes. And I was like, wow, man, that is a different way to look at that situation. That is a different perspective than the perspective that I take. And I'm reading this book right now, working on this internal narrative called It Didn't Start With You or something. It's right over here. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Bolan. And it's all about like ancestral trauma, inherited trauma, all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, man, because like, I think about like growing up, and I mean, my parents are still together. Like, we never wanted for anything growing up. I grew up a very privileged person. Like, I grew up externally presenting as a human that this society was built for, and I have lived in that privilege. And I today can recognize that like my experience is still my experience, and just because like I've heard stories about people who struggled in very different ways than I did. And just because I could know my parents were doing the best that they could with what they had. But it doesn't mean that like the trauma I experienced wasn't real. It just looked different than other people's trauma. And so, we kind of grew up in this environment where not like outwardly and really tangibly, my parents weren't, comparing me. I've got an older brother. It wasn't like comparing us against each other and all that stuff, in words and actions, but it wasn't feeling. And I knew I always felt something. And I've had a couple recent experiences that have come up that have been more tangible in my life where it's like, oh yeah, I'm not crazy. This is real, which has been cool. It's been like somewhat strangely validating. But I also recognize, like, I knew how my mom grew up, man. And like, I know my grandma, she's, a wonderful human and also like very opinionated. And my mom grew up in an environment where like you had to be perfect all the time. And so even though it wasn't like externally said in our house, like you have to be perfect all the time, Stephen, that's the air that I was breathing. And so anytime I messed up, I felt like I let my parents down. I felt like I let my family down. I felt like I was letting myself down. So like I can recognize intellectually anyway, that like a lot of that I'm never enough narrative comes from that kind of feeling. And I have an opportunity to make mistakes in front of my daughter today and allow those to be okay. Try to change that dynamic, try to change that air. So then she's not living with this narrative, because it sucks, man. Like I wouldn't wish this on anybody. It's a not a fun place to be. And in the same way that I'm grateful that I can be present, with my kid, and I can, when she asks to like build a fort, we can build a fort, rather than me thinking, no, man, like I got to go get high, or like, no, I need to go get another drink. Like I can be there and like build a fort. That's great. She said she wants to go to the zoo. We can ride our bikes to the zoo. Like, that's great. I can do those things and find joy in doing those things, being present for that. I also need to be present for the times when I am messing up, and teaching her that that's okay. Teaching her that we're just people. I mean, Liz, we were talking before this started. We were like, it's not going to be perfect, because like perfection is unattainable. Is like not a thing. We're humans. And like, what an important lesson that I can teach my daughter through my own mistakes. And I wouldn't have that if it weren't for getting outside help. I wouldn't be getting outside help if it weren't for being sober. And, I think it's like all of those things, and I can look at like this, like, the ripples in a pond kind of the impacts that it ends up having, just based on having some tools, to be able to take some action and recognize my responsibility for taking some action. And like, I didn't have that kind of stuff to be able to just like see, oh, I'm just going to do that next thing. And like, see where it goes. And I'll do that next thing and see where it goes. And like, that's the kind of stuff that I learned and continue to learn about in recovery.
Yeah. Well, because we're not, I think we just don't get those tools, period. I mean, that's one of the reasons that, we are in so many ways the lucky ones who have had these experiences and then had to go through a recovery process of like being really, really honest with ourselves and looking internally and seeing the hard things and pulling them out and sometimes showing them to other people and realizing that they're holding the same thing. And but like even people who have not had this experience, they didn't get those tools either. It's just not a thing that our society gives. And it's so much more than, it's giving yourself grace. It's giving other people grace. But in doing that, like, and believing it too, that you are enough and also they are enough. And it sounds like not only are you doing that work to, you've now realized that the call is coming from inside the house and it's not actually you on the phone. So you've realized that, you're talking about it, you're working on it. And not only that, but the fact that your partner is the person who kind of like brought that up and pointed that out, and you two are having those conversations and are able to, be so, intuitive and compassionate, with each other. I mean, that's something that your daughter's going to see too. Like, I feel like we don't always get, even if it is happening, the kid doesn't always get to see that. And that's really cool. And like, do you see, I just think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, I think I'm fortunate to also have a partner who also is in recovery and works in active program. It was her strength actually that gave me the strength to finally ask for help. She's got one more day sober than I have. And if we keep doing this deal, like, that's just like what it's going to be. As competitive as a person as I am, like, that's okay. I'm okay with that, which is weird. Like, and I believe it. But yeah, it's, our relationship's not perfect by any means. Like, no relationship really is, but we've got a shared language that we can use. And also like an appreciation that, like, our recovery has to come first. And it looks different today now that we have a kid than it did before. And we can go to as many meetings as we want to together and independently and all that kind of stuff, and like work whatever program it need to look like, and meet up with, sponsors and sponsees and do all that kind of stuff. And like, now with a 2-year-old, it's different. And so, last night my partner went to her meeting and like met with a sponsee she's working with, and I did all of the Harper stuff at night. And, it's hard trying to put a 2-year-old to bed without their mom when, like, that's a normal thing. And like, she cries for an hour trying to go through that. And I have an opportunity to not get frustrated, be like, yeah, she misses her mom. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And like, we can get through this together. And she fell asleep. And then, I put her down in her crib. She woke back up. So we sat back down for another hour. And, it's like, but I could be here and present for that, and know that, like, that's a way that I can be of service to my family by creating space for my partner to go and like work her program. That, again, it's like this beautiful cycle where, like, she works her program and they can show up better for us as a family too. And like, I have space, like, we just divide and conquer, and like, or divide and support, I guess, really is what we do. We don't conquer anything anymore. And it's just, it's a thing that, again, like, I try really hard not to compare, my story and experience to like other people's and all of that kind of stuff, because we all just have our own lived experience. And I've heard so many stories of people that are, especially in early recovery, struggling with somebody, like being in a relationship, struggling with someone that is potentially also has a similar kind of relationship with drugs and alcohol, but unwilling or unable to seek or want help at that time. And that sounds super hard, super hard. And like, I'm really, really grateful to not have had to have that experience. And, and like I said, have somebody who is also, super into, self-improvement, but like self-improvement through a method that, also works on like getting rid of self in like a strange way. It's like not a bunch of self-help books, So I don't know, it's just, it's yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's, and we just did I think it just aired today too. We just did a episode on dating while sober,
which I am an expert in. Not at all.
And I think like that's a part of that conversation where it's like that process of, and this could be in any relationship, with a relationship with your employer, or with a relationship with a significant other, or a relationship with a friend, or your kids. It's like, learning how to show up for self in order to be able to show up for the relationship. And I would say I could imagine, but I've had few experiences where it's yes, we're looking to build something together, and in order for us to build something together, like inherently it has to be that we build ourselves, and then we share what it is that we build with each other. And that's not the classical relationship approach. My ex had me watching The Notebook not too long ago, and it's this movie that everybody is like always raved about, like as being like such a good movie. And so I watched it, and I'm super like conscious and aware of things. So like I'm watching, I'm like, these two are horrible for each other. Like it's just like they're super passionate. Every time they're together, they're just arguing, but they loving on each other. Like there's nothing ideal and healthy about this relationship. Like why are we cheering for these people?
Because they're very good looking, Bryce.
And that's that's the zeitgeist. Like that's what we think that love is. And it's like, just from my experience, like I've learned that, in order for me to be in the best circumstance, like we have to prioritize showing up for each other. And it gets rough when I show up for myself, like I show up for myself. And I'll get off of this. I think this is just something personal on my chest, because I've had an experience where the person really wanted to contribute to something with me, but it wasn't a bad person, and our relationship wasn't like bad at all, but there was this unwillingness to have a conversation with themselves that couldn't contribute to something super full, because there's these things that I know, like, it's just weird. It's hard for me to show up when I know that you haven't had that conversation with yourself. And like, I know like what I care about or what I want to do here, like that's not as important as like looking at these things that, you've experienced. And I think maybe I might be some of the avoidance of that conversation. And then it's the whole thing with me, like, being very aware that you may never have that conversation with yourself. And I have not a monopoly on what's right. And, so what do I feel intuitively do I need to do, and then just how that goes. And it can get a little bit deep, but I think the most important thing that we can prioritize is our relationship with ourselves, because that's going to put us in the best environments with people. Because if this isn't the way that a person approaches their lives, like it's either going to repel you or it's going to attract you. And a lot of times, like, if you're repelled, it's nothing personal. It's just like, a lot of times you hear like, it's not that deep. And it's like, okay, yeah, I feel you, okay. And then the repelling happens, and it's like, okay, cool. But it's like, it's really like that for me, and in recovery, like when somebody speaks that language and can show up for you in that way and ask you, are you suffering? And then give you a different perspective on what that suffering is. Like that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing, and something worth nurturing.
Yeah, man. I mean, and I think that it's that whole mentality of like, you got to put your own air mask on first. Right. And, it's if we're not showing up for ourselves first, we inherently cannot show up fully for other people. And it's been like this kind of, recent unfolding of different perspectives and this kind of new experience that I'm going through right now is very reminiscent of my early recovery, where like I'm thinking my drinking and my using is only impacting myself. I'm thinking that this narrative, as hard as it is only impacting me. And then I'm fortunate today to have people in my life that are strong enough and to have relationships that are strong enough to have people that will be like, nah, man, actually like that narrative that you have kicking around your head, like shows up like this and this and this and this and this in our relationship. And it's impacting me, and it's impacting our kid, and it's impacting everything. And so get a handle on that. And what a gift today, talk about like ego deflation and kind of like dismantling of self. What a gift today, a gift from the universe, God, whatever, for me in that moment to be able to pause and have enough humility to hear that. And that's a gift of sobriety for me. That's a gift of recovery. I did not have that before. If anybody, regardless of who it was in my life, if anybody told me, no, man, like you're having this kind of impact on me, I would like buckle down and be like, no, you're wrong because of this and this and this and this, because this is how open-minded I am. Right. Yeah. You're wrong because of this and this and this and this and this. And I didn't have to be like that. I don't have to be like that today. I have a choice. And when I was actively drinking and using, I just never had that choice. Mm-hmm. I was constantly in that state of fighting, I guess, in a way. Fighting other people and like fighting people away from getting too close to me, because I hate me so much. So like, I don't want you to know who I am, because you're definitely going to hate me too. And it doesn't have to be like that. I can still choose for it to be like that today. It just doesn't have to anymore. And some days I'm better at making choices than other days.
It's like, I feel like it's because maybe that you're in a place that you feel safe, like within yourself and from yourself, and because so often I think when we're doing that, when we're fighting, when we're, when offense is our best defense, it's because we're just so afraid and we feel so unsafe. And it's just like, like just put those porcupine quills up, because I can't let that in. It's just too painful. And
yeah, it's a defense mechanism, right? And it's the things it's those behaviors that we learn, that we develop over time to be able to deal with whatever things we deal with. And, those of us that have this kind of relationship with drugs and alcohol, that's one of the tools I picked up to deal with these feelings, to deal with these behaviors, is like I put in. It changed the way that I felt. And, like I shared, like it worked really, really well for a really long time.
Yeah.
Until it got
to
a
solution before it's a problem.
It's a solution. Yeah. Until it got to a point where I, didn't want to be doing it anymore and still found myself doing it. I was like, wow, this maybe is an issue. Not too long, after that, of living in that misery, of saying, well, then my only solution is suicide, because I can't live like this anymore. I can't live, and I know that I can't not drink, because I've tried that, and it doesn't work. I just pick up again. Obviously I was unsuccessful in that, but thank God I was unsuccessful in that, because of all of the life that I've been able to live since then. And to be able to, have that experience and have that journey and know, like, I'm in, like, I don't have to live in that fear. I don't have to live in that, I hear this a lot kind of in the rooms and in recovery, where it's like, the fear of the fear of what the unknown is finally less than the fear of what, like the misery that you're in. So you like finally have enough to change. And, and it's a beautiful thing to get to that point. And, for me, it just took what it took.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to not have to live like that. And, to be able to show my kid a different way to live.
It's incredible. And more than just working a recovery program, which, clearly is something that is, something that you and your partner are actively doing. And that's just such a beautiful message to send. Like you have other very cool self-care and just hobbies and habits that I know that you do that I grew up with too. Actually, I grew up with two parents who were athletes and went running every single day. And it really influenced my ability to prioritize taking care of myself. So I think that's a message you're sending your kid too. And that was my not subtle shift into, let's talk about running, because I know that's something that's a really big deal in your life and recovery.
Oh man. Cool segue, Liz.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I think about this a lot. I live in extremes. And like, that's just like what I've realized about myself. I drink coffee in extremes these days. I drink yerba mate in extremes these days. Like it's everything that I do is like, it's 1,000% or zero.
Or nothing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Resonates.
And, like I've come to accept that that's just kind of who I am. But yeah, I grew up, my parents both are, my mom's in her 70s now. My dad's getting up there too. They're both still running marathons.
So awesome.
And that's just like what I grew up with. So the normal thing was you run marathons. And so then I started running halves with my dad. I've got a picture, from a lot of years ago now, but started running halves with my dad, a while back. And that was really cool. It was always just kind of like, maybe it was a way for me to connect with my parents in a way that like I knew that my brother wasn't. I'm like constantly searching for that, like, you know, outside approval and all that kind of stuff, which is, you know, great things I can get into with my therapist that I actively am. But kind of like regardless of how it started, it's something that I found like, oh, this is like a really amazing thing. You know, it used to be about the times. I used to be trying to go like really fast and like track all my, you know, all this stuff and like get really, really, really fast. And I really wanted to run a sub 3 hour marathon and like all of this stuff. And then, you know, I got injured because I overtrained and then I had to start doing some other stuff and I slowed down. My doctor recommended that I do some cross training when I was recovering from a broken femur from overtraining.
Ouch.
And so, you know, what are you going to do? And so I started doing triathlons. But true to my, like, I got to do everything extreme.
Sorry, Stephen, to recover from a broken femur, you did triathlons?
I need, my doctor suggested cross training. And so like, you know, cycling and swimming would be cross training. So I'm not just always running. This is my rationale. That makes sense, right?
All right. I'm just picturing you with your giant leg cast on, like, you know, trying to swim with a big plastic bag over your leg. So this is after it was healed.
This is afterwards. Yeah.
Got it. I'm with you.
This is more about like ongoing maintenance. But yeah, I mean, and I didn't know how to swim, but was like, well, if I'm going to do triathlons, I got to do Ironmans because extremes. And so, you know, started working with a coach and learned how to swim and like did all this stuff. And, you know, and I think one of the cool things, this is all in recovery. And this is why endurance sports for me had been a huge part of my recovery. Both for like a spiritual, like when I'm out running in the woods, when I'm, you know, kind of, you know, on a long bike ride, whatever it is, you know, I can recognize that like I'm a part of something much larger than just myself. And like, there's like a deep spiritual connection, especially from like out running in nature. You know, I'm fortunate to live in Colorado now and I can go run in the Rockies and it's epic. It's been really cool because I'm not as fast as I used to be anymore. But what I found is I can just push myself farther and farther. And I haven't found I guess like I found literal breaking points where like I break a femur from overtraining and things like that, but I haven't found the breaking point yet. So I just keep kind of going farther and farther. And so, you know, I've been the last few years kind of trading off like A races between, you know, triathlons and ultra marathons. You know, now I try to like maintain a level of, you know, fitness where if I want to get a 50K on my calendar because it seems like a good idea, I can kind of throw that on there and ramp up. And I've got one in 4 weeks. I just went and ran the course last weekend. It's awesome. And I get to sit in the fear that like I'm setting an expectation for my kid that this is normal, which is not. But, you know, it is what it is. And it's something that has been a really important part of my recovery journey. And also there's that idea of like just doing what's in front of me. Cause I can be 40 miles into a run and thinking the last thing that I want to do is keep going. But just know, like, I'm just here now. I got to keep my head where my feet are at. And I just got to keep moving forward and just do that next step. And maybe it's like, you know, I got to run to that tree. And then when I get to that tree, I got to run to that next tree. Maybe it's aid station to aid station, kind of whatever I need in that moment. And I've been fortunate to find a lot of other endurance athletes in recovery too, that, you know, there's a, you know, there are a lot of us that do things in extremes. And you know,
you think,
you know,
there's quite a few things circling in my head. Are you familiar with David Goggins?
Yeah.
David it can't hurt me. When you said I've yet to find a breaking point, I'm like, we got a David Goggins here. but I think the having to sit with the fear that I'm setting this example that this is normal to my kid, which is not. I think in that, and I can't reassure you anything, that's something that, you know, has to come from your internal. But I think within that, like inherently is awareness, and that awareness is going to serve you in being able to show up. And I think just that little tiny comment that you made, like is a reflection of the awareness that you're approaching life with, that will be a contribution to what your kid is able to pull out of you as a reference point. Because just that tiny awareness where like somebody is like, they wouldn't even consider that, oh, like, you know, I have my own stuff going on and that's why I run these marathons, but they wouldn't even consider that their kid would look at them like, oh, well, I got to do that then, you know, because that's what you do. I got to do it and have their own internal struggles. But the fact that you're aware of the reference point that your actions could be setting for your kid, like just goes to show, I think, that you're conscious about how you're showing up. And I think that's very important.
Yeah. Well, and what you're normalizing, I would argue, isn't that 50-mile runs are, you know, something that your child will have to do, but what maybe the message that I see you sending, that I'm receiving just by this conversation, is that what is normal is taking care of yourself and taking time for yourself and finding a thing that you enjoy and then doing it in your way. And like, you know what, your kid's going to be out in the world realizing that not everybody is doing 50-mile races. Like that's going to be pretty clear. That's just like not a thing that everybody does. But to be like, and, you know, regardless of what everybody else is doing and regardless of all the other, you know, things that, you know, the TV shows that are on or whatever, my dad has decided that this is a thing that's important to him. And so he's doing it. And like, maybe that means it doesn't really matter what everybody else is doing, but I can do what's important to me too. So I would say you're normalizing some pretty important and positive things.
I appreciate that. I mean, I try I'm hopeful that something is, you know, and this just gets back to like things like you can accomplish things if you put the work into it. And like, that's the thing is like, I haven't met one person that, you know, and this is definitely not my experience. Like when I first started running, even when I finished my first marathon, I wasn't thinking, you know what I could do? Probably run 3 more of these right now.
Yeah, in a row.
Yeah. And that's just like not what when I learned how to swim, so like in training for my first Ironman, like I was swimming 50 yards and I'm like, how am I going to swim 2.4 miles and then go ride 112 miles and then run a marathon? It's just like completely unfathomable, but you just put the work in little by little, day by day. You just do a little bit more. I mean, meditation was this way for me. And I'm like, you know, Bryce, I know this is like, you know, big
speaking his language.
And, yeah, I know. And when I first started trying to meditate, like I have a hard time sitting still. And so I could like sit for 3 minutes, and then this was pre-Harper. Things look a little bit different now, but like, you know, then it was 4 minutes, and it was 4 minutes for a while, and then it was 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden, you know, a couple months later, I was able to sit for 30 minutes. I don't think I got much above that, but like when I first started, it would be completely unfathomable for me to sit still with my thoughts. Again, these thoughts kicking around in my head, what they are, what we've been talking about, for 30 minutes. No way. But then it's all of a sudden totally manageable, totally doable because I put the work in to get there. And it's not, I think so much of the time, and this is like the challenge I get with like, you know, the like social media culture and like just living our whole lives there. It's like you see this, you see what people, like you show people what you want them to see. And it's lots of times it's like the final output. It's like, oh yeah, like you know, the before and after picture. It's like
microwave culture.
Yeah, man, totally, totally. Yeah, and like, and really, what I'm more interested in, and the kind of message, and like what I'm hoping I can instill and you know teach to my kid is like, you can get there. It's going to take work. And so like, and I heard this in a meeting one time where it was like we were talking about like willingness, and it's like I have theoretical willingness to do all kinds of stuff. But I know when I'm willing, when it happens. Only like, and until I do something, I'm actually not willing to do it. No matter what I tell myself. And so it's like, if I am willing to put a 100-mile race on the calendar and say, I'm going to do that, it's on the calendar. It's out there in the zeitgeist. It's out there. It's, you know, cool universe. This is the thing that's going to happen. I can post it on Facebook and be like, I'm going to do this thing. It's only going to happen once I toe the line and do all of those, like physically take all of those hundreds of thousands of steps that it's going to take to go from point A to point B. And all of that, you know, 30 to 40 weeks of training that it's going to go like take to go into that too.
Everything in between.
Yeah. That's kind of reminiscent of a saying that I've used in my recovery that Like we only know what we practice. And it's like, we'd be so quick to say, I know. Yeah, well, you know, like, do you really know? Like, you know, I know I'm a good person, or I know, like, did I just hold the door for that person, or did I just pick up the trash? Like, in this moment, like, I only know what I practice, you know? So it's important to, like, continue to implement what it is that we say that we want. And, you know, I don't see any other better place to plug, which is not even a plug. It's just like my personal experience with the Phoenix. Like a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, Stephen, like even at the Rise event, I ended up going on the mountain biking with Rich Falls. And Rich is insane. Let me tell you that. I hope you're listening to this, Rich.
Hi, Rich.
You're an
We love
insane
you.
man. But like I bike. I got my bike. I just bike to the store today. I bike all throughout the city of Dearborn. And so like, you know, this ain't gonna be nothing. And so it had got to a point where we was on this trail with Rich, and like he's trying to talk to me, and like I'm the second with him, and he's leading us, and he's trying to talk to me, and like I'm really like dying, and so I can't keep up with him to continue the conversation. So like I purposely like stopped talking to him, so I didn't feel like I had to keep up with him to keep this conversation going, because it's like, no, bro, this is not happening. We're not even talking right now. This is very serious. Stop talking to me. But I noticed there was a point where I was feeling like I'm going to give up. I can't do this. And that was the point where I was looking at Rich and I was comparing myself to him. Like, dang, like he's there and I'm here and I'm trying to get there, but I just don't have it. But like you said, like if just going to this tree, just the next step, like that incremental process allowed for me to just like, okay, stop looking at Rich because you're not Rich. And just like the next pedal and just get into your own flow, Don't even worry about the end. Just right now, let's just kind of keep pressing. And that experience that we can all like participate in with other people in a community with the Phoenix programming is invaluable. But I've learned in my own personal life, like that experience is like in entrepreneurship and fatherhood and anything that's ever been worthwhile in like I can't effort myself into understanding. Like it takes time, and it takes the incremental process of showing up for yourself and allowing for your capability in this moment to be in full exemplification and allow for that growth to come that's inherent in showing up in that moment. And you know, I think that's a very important lesson to be shared, and everybody is at their own level for real. But I think, like you said, social media will cause us to look at, you know, like, dang, I'm trying to get there and I'm not there yet and I don't have nothing to show for it. And it's like, when we compare, then it becomes this tough thing to come back to where we're at, especially if like it's almost, and then I'm gonna shut up and then I feel like we could talk all day, but like there's this notion of flow. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi authored this book called Flow, and it's I think it's called the Goldilocks something, where it's like that perfect level of challenge, where like if I want to go play tennis right now, and, you know, I want to go play with Serena Williams, like, I'm defeated before we even start. Like, I know you about to kick my ass. Like, this is not even about to be fun. Like, you know, like, I'm going to look stupid out here, right? But if I went and played my daughter, and I've used this example a couple of times, and I know my daughter's, like, going to beat me up if I keep using her as an example. But if I go play my daughter, like, I'm going to smash you. Like, there's no way that you'll beat me in tennis. I'm very competitive. If we get, like, play badminton with me, and you'll see, like, how it gets, right? So, but if I play somebody at my skill level, then it's like, oh, like I have to put in effort because I have a very high chance of winning this, but I have to like put in effort. And that little space of putting in effort where it's like, this will be challenging. I may lose, but if I put in enough effort, I may win. Like that level of challenge allows for us to get into a flow state that like brings us into like this experience. Mm-hmm. And that bringing into the experience, if we're talking about the transformational power of like the Phoenix and what it is, like the Phoenix programming, it's like, I'm thinking about nothing, everything, including like where I'm going to get my next drink, or how can I use, or, you know, all the problems in my life, or all the things that are going wrong. Like I'm tapped in, And it's that mixed with the power of community of other people doing this as well and showing up at their level, not comparing, because everything is modifiable. Everything is fun, emotionally and physically safe, inclusive, and accessible. Like, we're here just having a good time together, pushing ourselves to that limit together. And I think that allows for like this transformational effect. And I think it's a wonderful experience to have.
Yeah. I mean, it allows us to show up like, if we're able to be vulnerable enough, it allows us to show up authentically as we are. And I think the beautiful thing about the fact, like, we've got like, regular programming that's happening, accessible for kind of whoever it needs to be accessible for, is like that, like, my best is going to look different on different days. Mm-hmm. I mean, relating back to running, like, sometimes I'm like feeling really good, pushing my kid in the stroller, running around the park. And like, it's on pavement rather than on the trail, and it's all this stuff. And I'm like, cruising at 730s, feeling really good. And then some weekends I go and, run 22 miles with 3,000 feet of climbing, and it's all trails and rocks and all this stuff. And like, I'm running 10, 11 minute miles. And like, both of those are my best in that moment. And it's all these other kind of external circumstances and like internal circumstances, all that other stuff that like really adapts to like how we're showing up, how we're able to show up. But what I found is like being physically sober and being, for me, and being like as, spiritually connected as I possibly can be, allows me, again, it comes back to this choice. It gives me a choice to show up as authentic and be vulnerable and be open, or not, or try to front. And whenever I try to front, I end up like, screwing myself over and getting injured and doing that because like I'm trying to keep up with somebody that I can't, man. It's just like, that's a recipe for disaster for me. And then I'll have to get into something else because my doctor will say you need some other kind of cross training. I'll start going to CrossFit class.
Stephen, have you ever tried to paint? I think maybe you need to.
I know, we might have to give you specifics this time. Like, try to cross in. I'll do an Ironman. Okay. Like, how about something safer? I'll jump out of a plane. Okay. Yeah. Maybe next time. Yeah. Let's move to something artistic.
All right, well, I think it's that time in the podcast to get to Liz's very specific, magical, backflipping dolphin. I'm just going to start saying random words.
I don't even know where you're going with all this.
Question of the day.
Oh, Liz. My goodness. What could it be? See, it's not a surprise because Stephen listens to the podcast, so it's not going to sneak up. So, Stephen, if you could look back, if you could pull the curtains of time back and send a message to a previous version of yourself, maybe that's just pre-fatherhood, maybe that's pre-recovery, maybe that's pre-yesterday, whatever feels right for you. What words might you impart to that version of you?
You are enough.
Hell yeah. Say it to this version too. And all the other ones that are to come.
I'm working on that. I'm working on today's version. But yeah, I mean, I think that's like the biggest thing. That's what's been kicking around for me right now. And critically important.
Yeah, I love it. We definitely applaud your process. I think you're a shining example of what it looks like to continually show up for oneself and in turn be a contribution to your environment. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who listen to this podcast episode and hear a lot of their stories and yours. Mm-hmm. And it's been an absolute privilege to kick it with you. I've had to be like conscious of the time.
And we've totally failed at that too. This is probably the longest we've ever gone because it's so much fun to talk to you.
I feel like, bro, like we could just talk forever. When I knew you'd be on the show, I'm like, okay, this would be an easy one for real because, I really appreciate your energy. And yeah, man, you're just a delight to kick it with.
Thanks, Bryce. I appreciate that. And Liz, this has been way less anxiety provoking than my brain told me it was going to be. So I appreciate you both.
We did our job.
Yay. Yeah,
we did our job.
Good.
Yeah. See, it's just one more little piece of evidence that it's not true. Just because it's happening in your mind. Yeah. I need to hear that too. Over and over again. So, just to echo Bryce, it's been really fun to have you on and feel really privileged to know that this won't be our last conversation that we get to have because I'm glad to have you as a person in our sphere in my life and just grateful for you being part of this community. So Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Grateful for you both.
And we are also grateful for every single person who has plugged us into their earbuds today. So thank you so much for listening, for showing up for us, for you, for community, for being open. And please be sure that you have subscribed if you haven't already. If you'd be so kind to give us a rating and review, that really does help. We've got definitely far more people listening than have left any words of feedback. So we definitely want to hear from you. And a great way to do that is by leaving a rating and review wherever you do listen to podcasts. But how else can they do that, Bryce?
They can also download the Phoenix app and come to the podcast group in the app. So can I kick it with y'all real quick? I just really want to have a heart-to-heart with you all. Like, it's very important that we have a conversation with each other, because this is your show, for real. You know, we wanna know how you're feeling about the show. I think feedback is one of the most important currencies of creating a show. We want to know, what are you enjoying? What are you not enjoying? What would you want to see more of? Your ideas are very important to us, and we need you to talk to us. Let's kick it. Can we talk?
All right, we gotta go. Bryce is singing.
All right, he's cut off. But go download the Phoenix app and then hop in a podcast group in the app and come say, hey, we'd love to hear from you.
We sure would. All right, well, thanks everybody. We will catch you next time.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.